Today on CityCast DC, we are talking about the future of the mall, that is the National Mall, and we're talking about a spate of weird crime stories in DC and why you need to go to the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens right now. I'm here with my CityCast comrades, Kayla Cote-Stemmerman and Priyanka Tilve. Today is Friday, July 12th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Kayla.
Good morning.
Hey, Priyanka.
Hey, good to be here.
It's good to see you guys in our virtual taping concept, but I'm actually really pumped to see you guys in live person tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this live taping. If you haven't heard about it yet, we're going to be at Metro Bar tomorrow at 2 p.m. So that's Saturday, July 13th at 2 p.m. at Metro Bar, like right off the Red Line stop. We're going to be doing a live taping with the DC Office of Planning. They put out this podcast about the North Capitol neighborhood of DC, which if you don't know where it is, it's like near Catholic University, near the what is now being called the Reservoir District. But it's a massive area that has grown and changed a lot in the last few years and is looking at a lot of change ahead too. So they did some oral histories with people out there in the interest of trying to figure out what are the best ways to plan this neighborhood going forward, and also like how to approach planning citywide. And we're going to pick their brains about it. What did they learn? What changes would we like to see? Mike's going to be hosting it. So come hang out with us.
And just so people know, because I'm a nerd for planning things, as you know, but I realize that a lot of the people in my life, a lot of my loved ones, their eyes glaze over when they hear in any proximity the words urban planning podcast. But think of it this way. We're actually going to be talking about what's going to happen to our city and what it's going to look like and feel like and how it's going to get done, which actually is a thing a lot of people care about, some for excited, pumped about the future reasons, some for NIMBY scared reasons. But we welcome one and all. Especially members.
Yeah, I feel like so many people gripe about changes that have happened to the city in like after the fact, and coming and engaging in these kinds of conversations beforehand is your way to prevent the city from changing in ways you don't like. So yeah, come hang out with us and make your voice heard.
All right, so speaking of changes in the city, I was really intrigued by the story this week in the Business Journal and the Post, a bunch of other places, about not especially fleshed out plans to expand the National Mall, to sort of have it, if you think of yourself heading towards the Lincoln Memorial, the mall and you will take a right and wind your way to the Kennedy Center over what is now a bunch of ugly freeway entrances and so on. This is a thing I've actually written a column about before. We're running out of this crucial national resource, mall. Washington is running out of mall. And this is a thing people have known for a while, right? The mall is chock-a-block with monuments, museums. There's plans for 2 new museums on the mall. There's just not all that much space. And over the years, there's been a lot of plans floated. There was an idea of extending the mall or making a new mall down South Capitol Street at one point. And this is it's smaller, but it's actually, if you think of the mall as this great urban vista in Washington, could be a fairly dramatic change. The Kennedy Center is a weird thing. It's got, a lot of world-class art stuff. But if you try to make an evening of it, it's going to be a car-centric evening. It's just, it's very strange to walk to the Kennedy Center from anywhere because you wind up dodging high-speed vehicular traffic at some point in the evening.
Yeah, I actually very recently experienced this. I went to dinner and a show at the Kennedy Center with a friend, and we got dinner in DuPont, and then we're like, oh, we'll just walk over there, we'll just hop over. And it's 20 minutes of going over highways, and like there's no obvious way to go. You have to go like all the way around. It's like the least walkable part of DC to something that should be one of the most accessible resources to people here. And it just seems like a honestly huge oversight in terms of urban planning. And this looks incredible to me. Like, the schemes look amazing.
I agree. It's been a huge oversight. I kind of understand why it happened this way. I mean, it's so close to Virginia. As far as commuting goes, this is a main entry point for a lot of people coming in and leaving the city for work. So it seems like common sense that there would end up being a bunch of highways there. But I am excited to see how this revamp is going to allow for some vehicular traffic while also still making it a more pedestrian and bike friendly area of town. The pictures do look stunning.
For like old timers, meaning like people who were like doing activism in the 60s and 70s, the fact that's the only, like really one of the only places in DC that has like a tangle of highway stuff represents this enormous victory. There were schemes to put interstates across the mall and across parts of downtown, things that would have like really ruined the character of a lot of places. And those schemes were mostly defeated, almost entirely defeated, except that one place where 66 comes across and, it's pretty grim. The idea here, and again, it's really sort of a conceptual document. There's nothing specific, is sort of like the Big Dig in Boston. Take all those highways that come in, put them underground, and then on top of where they are, create sort of lawn and open space and mall, which I assume will then eventually have memorials to whatever we're excited about in 50 years, and connect Kennedy Center with the downtown.
So looking at these plans, I mean, what does it specifically look like? What is the park going to look like? Are there going to be any memorials, any monuments? Are there going to be any roads on it at all?
And like what areas exactly are being connected here to the Kennedy Center?
The sort of urban planning part is all very inchoate. But right now, if you think of when you're at the Lincoln Memorial, right, and if you were to go past it, there's steps going down to the water on the far side of it, away from the mall. And then if you sort of look northwest, right, like you're going to take like a soft right, quite quickly you run into, there's some grass, and then there's the approach ramp for 66, the approach ramp for the other bridge, a bunch of stuff, and then the Kennedy Center. And the idea is that bunch of stuff, those highways, go underground. And what they've put on their renderings is just grass and circles and paths. Look, the history of the mall being what it is, we know what will happen to those grass and circles and patches, which is that eventually people will find a use for them. Maybe it'll be, a memorial to something or a museum that someone hasn't thought of yet. Less likely that it would be like a volleyball court or something, because the Park Service has not been historically thrilled about using mall space for kind of small d democratic recreation. That's what city parks are for. They see this mall as almost like a museum in and itself or a memorial in itself, not a place to kick around balls. But the point is it creates a like pretty vast new amount of open land, which will then be used for mall-like purposes.
Yeah, I mean, it looks really beautiful. And like my favorite thing about DC is the green space. And I'm proud of how much we already have here, but I'm always happy to have more.
It's an interesting thing because it's like it's kind of hard to, it's a thing we've talked about a lot in this pod, to disaggregate it from the talk about what's going to happen to downtown and do people still come to offices and so on, because the mall currently is ringed. There's museums, but there's a lot of the Federal Triangle. There's a lot of federal workers, many of whom don't come in as often. And I'm not quite sure how these two things intersect, but I'm certain that they will and must.
Yeah, well, the doc also does mention that they're planning to potentially have some mixed-use housing and stuff in this area too, which in theory should help with like property taxes, like bringing in revenue for the city. So working towards some of those problems you just raised that have been caused by the empty offices.
So what is the timeline? It's not 50 years,
there is no,
it?
I mean,
there is no timeline.
There is no
Okay.
timeline, but I can't imagine it's less than 50 years because it just takes a long time to get things done. And there's also, when you talk about burying lots of highways and putting things over them, this is an expensive thing. And we're in a moment, we're doing an episode with Jeanette Dill about this, about Republican plans for DC, where on the one hand, there's a real desire to make an example of this liberal city, should Trump win. And there's a, like transit has become a culture war issue. So it's one party is like pro-car and one party is like pro-transit. So anything seen as punishing drivers, I think, will be hard to sell. On the other hand, the Republicans have made a big show of wanting Washington to be a beautiful place. And their notion of beauty is like classical, imperial, monument, Roman kind of stuff. In this case, that I think dovetails with that of a lot of Washingtonians that regard, like leaving aside what sort of architects design the buildings that are on this, the notion of a big, open, triumphal vista is a thing that I think spans the partisan divide. When I did a column like more than a year ago about the desire to expand the mall, I was struck by people from the sort of right-wing classical architecture organization, as well as people who are more progressive, basically saying the same thing of like, yes, we must do this.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because like I feel like the mall is a focal point of patriotism, which is such a Republican talking point. And so expanding it does seem like the kind of thing that would fit in their platform, expanding the space that is representative of everything great about our city and DC. But then you're right about the car culture thing that is seen as like liberal cities are trying to kill our car culture. So I am curious to see how both sides of the aisle would respond to this plan.
But I would push back on the patriotism as a conservative thing. I think the way the mall particularly has been used in the last, I don't know, maybe since the Vietnam Memorial, which was like more than 40 years ago, is it is now a place where people who have been historically excluded, Vietnam vets felt kicked around, are symbolically sewn into our American family, invited to the national table by having some memorial or museum for this group given a spot on the mall. So the African American museum's on the mall. There's plans for a women museum and a museum of the American Latino, all on the mall. Weirdly, there's actually better spaces. Like one idea for one of those museums, I don't remember which one, was to put it in the Energy Department building, I think, right across Independence Avenue, which is actually like a better place, more convenient to the metro, bigger, nicer. But the response was, no, we must be physically on the mall. So the idea of like creating this space that is like big enough to hold our ever-growing, ever-diversifying American tableau, I think that's like a kind of a liberal idea too.
Yeah, you're
Whether
so
a
right.
Republican-ruled America will approve museums to historically marginalized groups or to any groups is a different story. But
No, you're totally right. It has become like a symbol of diversity too. I just meant like more in terms of perception. Like it's the one place in town where I very frequently see MAGA hats.
yeah, it's the place in town where you frequently see out-of-towners.
Sure. But they will flock to the National Mall and be happy to be there, I guess.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously all of this is way down the line. It's going to take a very long time for these plans to even get finalized, much less built out and executed.
It's true. And as we've talked about again on this pod a lot, the thing about DC in particular and the federal property in DC specifically is there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And there's these boards that are presidentially appointed. There's just a lot of people who've got opinions. And, I think it's generally healthy for the country if many people have thoughts about how its shared collective resource looks. But that is not conducive to speed.
Totally. Oh, yeah. We did that episode about unbuilt architecture in Washington, like the things that never happened. I really hope this plan doesn't go that way.
Yeah, I think the historical odds of mall ambitions being realized are pretty low, but it would be cool if this happened.
Fingers crossed.
Want to know one of my favorite sounds? Here it is. That's the sound I hear when I'm learning Spanish with Babbel. And if you want to learn a new language this year, I guarantee it'll be one of your favorite sounds too. I'm David Plotz. I'm the CEO of CityCast, and I've been doing Babbel for a few weeks, and it's been so much fun. This week, I've been learning lots of food vocabulary and how to order in a restaurant. This is one of the things I love about Babbel, is that it's about learning the language so that you can use it. As Babbel says, it's designed by real people for real conversation. So it's all based on real life situations. And these restaurant lessons are awesome. When I went to Mexico City last year with my girlfriend, I was a mute. But next time, I'm going to be ordering the sopes and las salsas picantes. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold, plus all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint, stain, and varnish easy with convenient drop-off locations like your local paint or hardware store. Each new paint project is an opportunity to reduce waste, and Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up leftover paint. And 3, recycle the rest. Visit paintcare.org/3simplerules to get tips on how to buy the right amount of paint, explore ideas for DIY projects for how to use up leftover paint, and look up your nearest drop-off site in the district.
All right, so to going from like the memorial and grand to the gritty
And macabre.
and macabre. So, Frank, as you know, I'm always saying how much more fun it would be to live in DC if we had an actual tabloid and tabloid culture. But there have been 3 crime stories reported in the last week that kind of have that feel, like the kind of thing that people might actually talk about with strangers.
Oh, truly. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a news story in DC with the phrase sugar daddy in it.
That wasn't even the best phrase in it. Severed thumb.
Severed thumb and sugar daddy. But I was just like, this isn't the first sentence. That's okay. In the Washington Post. So yeah, first weird crime story that caught our eye this week. There was this woman who was accused of severing the thumb of her quote unquote sugar daddy to access his bank accounts and pay for his things. Yeah. You want me to start with the fact that he was killed?
I was going to say you neglected to mention his murder before the thumb severing. It wasn't like she just cut his thumb off and left and then he called the cops.
Okay, yes, fair point. There was a murder first. So Tiffany Taylor Gray is her name. She's one of the suspects who's been charged. Her, again, quote unquote, sugar daddy was this guy named Fasil Teklemariam. And they found his body a few days after he'd been murdered in his apartment, and his thumb was gone. They had taken his thumb. And so then police interviewed some witnesses who said that it was Tiffany Taylor Gray and a few others who had gone in, attacked this man, taken his thumb, and then the witnesses say they saw her use the thumb to steal money from his bank accounts.
Meaning it's like for a thumbprint on a phone?
Yeah, I think a thumbprint on his phone. Honestly, this is something I have actively thought about when setting up my bank apps on my phone and allowing for the biometric access to just authorize any sorts of changes with my thumb. I've been this seems a little risky. If it's a password, it's just in my brain. If it's a thumb, someone could knock me out and use my thumb to access things. Is this just me?
I can confidently say I've never thought about that.
I have definitely thought about this. I've also never set up the Face ID for this reason, because I'm what if I'm sleeping and someone uses...
I just feel if somebody's using your face or your thumb to access your bank account, you're probably already deceased, in which case, who cares?
So then there was also the Frenchie story.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, moving on to the next one. There's been a trend of people stealing French bulldogs in DC over the past year. We did a whole episode on this. They're designer dogs. They are expensive. And so the theory is that people are stealing them and then selling them to the highest bidder. So another one of those incidents happened in the past few weeks. This woman named Janine Brown, her Frenchie was stolen at gunpoint. It was actually the 5th time that someone had attempted to steal her little dog named Yerman. This time they succeeded. So they got Yerman. She was obviously distraught. And then they tried to ransom the dog to make her pay to get it back. So she ended up organizing a stakeout with some police officers at a Papa John's in Southeast. So Brown invited the people who had her dog to meet her at the Papa John's, and she was going to theoretically pay them the ransom. And then in the end, there was a police officer in there waiting for them, and they caught the people.
The Frenchie connection.
That's crazy.
The Frenchie connection.
That's like a movie.
A lot of these French bulldog thefts have resulted in the police getting the dogs back and the owners getting the dogs back, but the actual culprits absconding, getting away. In this case, the dog was back and the people were caught. So
if I was about to get a big ransom score, I probably wouldn't eat at Papa John's.
yeah, fair.
I would probably have said, meet me at Red Hen.
Meet me at Lee Dip. Then another really bizarre story that happened in the past week was regarding Justice Sotomayor. So obviously the justices get police protection, security detail, and there were U.S. Marshals who patrol that area. There was an attempted carjacking last week where a teenager walked up to what they saw as a normal car. Turns out it was an unmarked government vehicle with a U.S. Marshal inside. And this teenager tried to steal the car. They walked up to the window with a gun. And so the marshal shot the kid in the mouth, actually. Non-threatening. Kid survived, but obviously was caught, charged with armed carjacking, carrying a pistol without a license, and possession of a large capacity ammunition feeding device.
Why did he shoot him?
Wait, in the face. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this. My instinct when I first read the story was like, the U.S. Marshal could have done a bunch of other things to apprehend the teenager without shooting him in the face.
But presumably the teenager had a gun in the marshal's face.
Yeah, exactly. The teenager walked up with a gun to the window, and it must have been like me or you kind of situation. So that was why.
But wait, there actually was like, on less weird crime front, there was news that the police chief made about crime and local small businesses.
Right. Yeah. I guess, yeah, the two important crime updates this week were that carjackings are 46% down. So that's a nice little win. And then the police chief has been working on this real-time crime center that they've unveiled that's supposed to loop up every single public camera in the city. And this week, Police Chief Pamela Smith was on a panel at Catholic University, and she asked small businesses in the area to also feed their security cameras into that real-time crime center. So I mean, not sure if that's actually going to happen, of course. It was like it's a request and businesses would have to get on board and agree to do it. But that was, I thought, an interesting development this week. In some ways, and we've talked about this on the show before, like in some ways it makes it feel like another step towards surveillance state. But also, these cameras are already everywhere and they already have access to them when needed. So in a preventative way, maybe this is a good thing.
Does this freak you guys out or make you shrug?
It's one of those situations where, like, when I read the thing, my instinct is to be like, oh, God, that's terrible. But then I think about all the ways that I've already consented to my image and data being out there. And I'm like, it's probably too far gone.
Yeah, it's far too late for me, if I'm being honest. So
I feel like if you watch the like local TV news, like a not insignificant percentage of the stories involve things that were captured on a Ring camera. You know,
yeah,
like
totally.
A bear wandered into someone's lawn in Fairfax County. Like you say, this is all out there.
I mean, maybe that also is a problem. Maybe the fact that we do feel that we're too far gone is a bad thing, but it is also the reality.
All right, so you guys, it's hot, as you may have heard or felt, and this has made most people go inside. But Kayla, you are our Things to Do maven, and one of the things the heat has meant is that the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens is in full bloom already.
Yeah, so the Kenilworth Gardens, which usually the peak bloom this year is a little bit early because it's been so hot and dry and the flowers are just loving that. And if you haven't been, I mean, Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, it's like my favorite place in the city. It's absolutely gorgeous when it's in bloom. There's 45 different ponds with like thousands and thousands of lilies. There's several different types of lilies. I think the most popular one is like the sacred lotus, which is like that pink flower with the yellow sort of center that's really classic looking. It's in one of the few wetland areas along the Anacostia that hasn't been drained. So it's actually a really interesting place if you're into like ecology and swamps. And there's some really nice boardwalks and sort of educational information about creatures that live there. But it is really hot. So
is it like if you take a walk there and you're looking at the aquatic gardens, is it shaded, these boardwalks?
Yeah, this is the thing. It's mostly unshaded. I would highly recommend avoiding midday, not only because it's going to be really hot, but also because the lotus is closed during midday because it's so hot. So you really want to go in the morning or the afternoon when they're open and bring an umbrella. There is shade on the boardwalk, but the main area is quite toasty. That being said, it's also a swamp, so don't wear flip-flops. It's pretty wet out there. No matter what you do, you're going to get a little bit muddy, unfortunately.
What's the best way to get there? I mean, it's in one of those parts of Northeast DC where they did put a lot of high-speed roads / highways by the river, and there's not an easy pedestrian grid to access it. What's the best way to go?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious and easiest way is to drive. It's also along the Anacostia Riverwalk, so you can actually bike up to this or walk up, I guess. It's a little bit of a ways.
The Orange Line isn't far. The Deanwood stop on the Orange Line is like a 15-minute walk. I mean, I think you do have to walk across a major road, so it's not ideal, but it is possible.
But yeah, anyways, I highly recommend it. I never regret going. Bring an umbrella, bring your little fans with the spritzer spray stuff. It's really beautiful.
How much does it cost?
It is free. It's totally free for everybody. You can spend as much time as you want there. There's bathrooms. There's different sort of mini exhibits. They also have a lotus and water lily festival that they have every year that has yoga and forest meditations and walks and stuff like that you can check out. It's really family friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, Kayla's actually covered this in our newsletter and website. So if you need further enticing, check out the guide that she wrote up because it's really good.
And you can ask her about it in person tomorrow.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Come to our live taping. The RSVP, the Eventbrite, will be in our show notes. So you can click there to get even more details. But once again, Metro Bar, 2 p.m., right off the Red Line. Bryant Street Market is right there, too. Come have lunch beforehand and then come to the show.
On the MBT, you could bike up. Yeah.
Right.
No
It's
excuses.
a great Saturday. No excuses.
Kayla, Priyanka, awesome to see you guys.
Yeah, same.
Thanks, Mike.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our senior executive producer is Priyanka Tilve. Our senior producer is Julia Karen. Our assistant producer is Ash Durbin. Kayla Cote-Stemmerman is the editor who writes our daily newsletter, Hey DC. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, come see us tomorrow at our live taping. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.